Will Borgen has brought physicality as well as steady and consistent play since being acquired by the New York Rangers. Should the Blue Shirts keep, trade, or extend their 28-year-old defenseman?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1224 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I thought we could go ahead and have a discussion concerning a specific player on the New York Rangers, and that is Will Borgen, obviously the defenseman that the Rangers picked up in the Capo trade. I feel like overall he's mostly been winning over Ranger fans with his brand of physical play and just seemingly always being in the right position and just playing steady, consistent hockey, coming off of what I thought was maybe his best game as a New York Ranger against the Vegas Golden Knights. The Rangers, of course, grinded their way to a tough 2-1 win. And with Borgen, they're in kind of a tough position here because it's difficult to know what the best option is as far as how to proceed with him going forward. Do you trade him before the deadline and get back, some kind of an asset, whether it's a prospect or I would think probably a draft pick or maybe even multiple draft picks? Do you simply keep him and let everything play out this season the way that it's going to play out and then just kind of see what happens if you want to bring him back and extend him in the offseason? Or do you try to extend him right now or at least before the trade deadline so that you've got him locked up? I think there's honestly a case to be made for any of these three different options. I like them in different orders. I'll rank them a little bit at the end of the episode and certainly come to a conclusion as far as what my favorite option is with Will Borgen. And if you're watching on YouTube, there might be a little bit of a spoiler on the graphics, but we'll just keep that to ourselves for anybody that might be listening on audio right now. But the bottom line, again, it's a difficult decision and one in which I don't think there's any slam dunk option. Again, I think a compelling case can be made for all three of these options that I just mentioned. But let's go ahead and just kind of revisit the trade here first, and then I'll get into some of the options and all the pros and cons of said options. Again, for anybody that needs a quick refresher, wasn't that long ago, but Will Borgen was acquired by the Rangers from the Seattle Kraken, in exchange for Capo, a third-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. And so with that being the case, I want to also acknowledge the elephant in the room here, and that is, of course, the very simple fact that Capo has played very, very well for the Seattle Kraken ever since being dealt over there. It's funny because the writing was really on the wall as far as Kako being traded. Once the Rangers made him a healthy scratch, it just kind of felt like that was the direction they were going to go. And I know a lot of Ranger fans were not happy about the healthy scratching. A lot of Ranger fans were not happy about the trade either. You can count me among you in both of those groups. But the bottom line, what's done is done. Kako has gone to Seattle, and he's done great so far. He's played 11 games with the Kraken. He's got 3 goals and 5 assists, so 8 points in 11 games. He's an even plus-minus in that time, and he's also racked up 16 hits. There was a game the other night where Kako scored 2 goals in the span of just a minute and 40 seconds. Also scored on the power play and seems to be getting some more power play time there as well. So good for Capo. I'm happy for him, and if nothing else, at least the Rangers traded him not only out of division, but out of conference. So they don't have to get, burned by him more than maybe like once or twice a year, hopefully. We will see. But again, I just wanted to acknowledge that because I know there's going to be a lot of people pointing out that, Kako's done great. Yes, he has. He's done a great job with the Kraken, and good for him for doing that. But like I said a minute ago, what's done is done. He's gone. Will Borgen is here. And again, we're going to get into the options as far as what the Rangers can do with him. But I also want to highlight some of the plays that Borgen made against Vegas and just kind of elaborate my point that I think that was one of his best games. I want to talk about him more in the most recent episode, but I knew we were going to be doing this episode today, the Will Borgen show basically here, as it were. So against Vegas, he showed a little bit of everything. I think he showed you some of the reasons why Ranger fans are beginning to buy into him, why certainly I'm not the only Ranger fan that would like to see him stick around past, the rest of this season. But to highlight a couple of these plays here, you get 20 seconds into the second period, and we know how the Rangers can occasionally struggle at the beginning of periods. That's been a problem off and on for a handful of seasons now. First 20 seconds of the second period, the Vegas Knights, they're going in, basically uncontested on a rush into the Ranger zone, and Borgen is able to get over to the other side of the ice, extend his stick, and redirect the shot out of play. This is a high danger scoring chance for the Knights that Borgen was able to defend, and obviously not even let them, get a shot on net in that instance. Also in the second period, there's a situation where there's a scramble in front of the Ranger net, just complete chaos in the crease there. Borgen is down on the ice, like in the crease. The Knights are looking for the stuff in goal, and Borgen did a really nice job here, sort of like protecting the puck a little bit, but also not covering the puck, because if he does that, it's going to be, obviously a penalty shot for the Vegas Golden Knights, and so he didn't want to do that. He's able to kind of protect the puck, kind of shield it, and allow Igor to cover it, so that was nice to see as well. And then you've got the third period. This is when the Knights are starting to get their push a little bit. They're swarming, and Borgen does a really nice job. Just a little thing, but he picks up his guy in front of the net. When Vegas, it was kind of a chaotic offensive zone possession for the Knights in the Ranger zone, and he's able to pick up his guy and take away a potential pass in front, which again doesn't sound like that much, but the way the Rangers have been leaving the front of their net wide open for, such long extended periods of play pretty much throughout the entire season, you do notice things like this, and a play like that can make a difference. And then, of course, we get to the final 30 seconds in this game, and just the fact that Borgen is on the ice, I think that tells you that the Rangers are beginning to trust him. The coaching staff, Laviolette, they all trust him in spots like this. There was a play where the Knights dumped the puck into the Ranger zone with 26 seconds left, and again, the Knights are down by 1 goal in this spot. And Borgen goes back behind the net to get it. And it's a really smart play here. Does that thing where he just basically pins the puck against the boards. I think he even had his skate on top of the puck. And there's guys coming over and hitting him and trying to get the puck loose. And Borgen is basically single-handedly bleeding the clock in that spot. The clock is your friend. The more time you can kill in that spot, the better. And Borgen, great situational awareness there and great execution as well. Again, killing off a decent amount of time that was remaining in the game for the Knights to potentially get the game time goal. So again, I thought he just played a whale of a game. And that's kind of going to build into what I'm going to talk about here, because you guys are probably figuring it out that I become a pretty big Will Borgen fan here. And if you haven't figured it out by now, yeah, I'd like to see him stick around past this trade deadline, past this season. But again, we are going to look at all three options the Rangers have. And we're going to start with the possibility of the Rangers actually trading Borgen, maybe flipping him to a team that's a little bit higher up the standings than the Rangers currently are. And we will get to that option in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season absolutely unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys for tuning in and hanging in there through the offseason, the preseason, the regular season. Hopefully the postseason, we'll see how it goes for the Rangers. They're currently on the outside looking in, but obviously playing quite a bit better over the last handful of games here. So back to Will Borgen. Again, we're going to lay out every possible option that the Rangers have with him going forward and talk about the pros and cons of each of them. We're first going to look at the possibility of trading Will Borgen. And of course, what the Rangers do with Will Borgen and really with a bunch of their players as we approach the trade deadline here, it's going to be largely dictated by how the Rangers perform between now and then. If they keep playing the way that they've been playing recently, and they are 3-0-1 in their last 4 games, then that will give management a little bit more confidence in them. That will, I would think, give Chris Drury a little bit more confidence in them, and maybe you'll see the Rangers hang on to their guys with expiring contracts at the end of the year, whether that's Borgen, whether that's Riley Smith. There's some RFAs too. Keandre Miller. He's somebody that he himself has kind of an uncertain future with the Rangers. And another player that I think it could go a couple of different ways with Miller, between now, the deadline, the offseason, all that good stuff. But the bottom line, again, the Rangers have played better. There's good news and there's bad news as far as where the Rangers are in the standings right now. And again, a lot of this is going to dictate what they do with Borgen and some of their other players as well. The bad news is that even after going 3-0-1 in their last 4 games, the Rangers are still 4th to last in the Eastern Conference. That's the bad news. The good news is, even with that being the case, they're only 4 points out of the final playoff spot. They're 4 points behind the Blue Jackets, who currently stand as the second and final wild card team. And when you look at the teams ahead of the Rangers, everybody's bunched together, but there's nobody that you look at and think that like, oh, that team is like way better than the Rangers. Like, I don't think that team exists, at least not in that grouping that I'm talking about in the Eastern Conference. I mean, if you want to say that a team like the Panthers is better than the Rangers, or the Canes right now, I'm not going to put up much of a fight on that. But as far as the teams that the Rangers need to pass between now and the playoffs starting, yeah, I think the Rangers are on even footing with both of those. Evil footing, that would be bad. They're on even footing with all those teams. And, teams that I think the Rangers could very easily eclipse between now and then. But the Rangers are going to have final say here. If the Rangers can rally, if they can keep playing the way they're playing, if they can climb back up the standings, then I think somebody like Will Borgen, he's probably safe as it pertains to, being traded at the trade deadline. But the other big factor here, and the reason why the Rangers could end up trading Will Borgen, even if they do climb the standings, is what can you get for him? Now, obviously, Will Borgen, he is on the final year of his deal. He's an impending UFA at the end of the season, carries a cap hit of $2.7 million. So I propose the question to you guys, because I certainly don't have the answer. Good luck trying to figure out the NHL trade market. But the question that I propose to all you is, what can you get for Will Borgen? To me, a second-round draft pick sounds about right. That seems like it's in the ballpark of what would be fair for both sides. I would certainly think you would do no worse than a third-round pick for Will Borgen. But if the Rangers are in contention and they're right there, say they're like in the second wildcard spot or like a point or two behind at the deadline, I would not give Will Borgen away for certainly a third-round pick. I might not even give him away for a second-round pick, because at that point, clearly the Rangers are moving back in the right direction, and Will Borgen is somebody that I think can help you get there. But again, the trade market is very, very difficult to figure out. I call to your attention Exhibit A. This will always be my Exhibit A when talking about this. Tanner Jeannot a few years ago. Now, look, physical, big, tough player, somebody that obviously can play an important role for this team or for that team. But he was traded by the Predators to the Lightning in exchange for a prospect and 5 draft picks, including a first-rounder and a second-rounder. So that one just blew my mind. You just never know how this is going to shake out and how it's going to go. I don't think the Rangers could get like that kind of a haul for Borgen, but if they did, obviously they would certainly have something to think about at that point. But again, it depends on 2 things. Where are the Rangers in the standings as far as whether or not they trade Will Borgen, and what would the return be? And if some team blows your mind with a return package for Will Borgen, I think you owe it to yourself to take that offer seriously and perhaps even pull the trigger. I also want to throw out one other sort of sub-idea of trading Will Borgen here before we move on to the next option. This is something that's very rare. You don't see it very often really in any sport, but it does happen every once in a while. You trade Will Borgen before the deadline, and then once the offseason gets here and Borgen becomes a UFA, assuming, of course, that he does not sign an extension with the team that acquires him from the Rangers. He would be a UFA. And you're the Rangers, you go back out into free agency and you re-sign Will Borgen for the upcoming season and, however many years that he ends up getting on his contract. But like I said, you don't see that very often where a team trades somebody at the deadline and then they become a free agent and they re-sign him in free agency the upcoming offseason. It's not completely unheard of. One New York sports example that always kind of comes to mind when it comes to a team pulling this off is when the Yankees, years back, they traded Aroldis Chapman to the Chicago Cubs at the trade deadline. He won a World Series there. Then, of course, free agency hits the next offseason, and he's right back with the Yankees after that. So it can happen, but it's very rare, and I can't even think of a Ranger example of that. Maybe somebody can refresh me. Now, I know there's players that have been on the Rangers and they go away for a while and then they come back. Jimmy Vesey's on the team right now. He's an example of that. But as far as doing it like that, nothing's really coming to mind. If anybody can think of one, definitely let me know. But that pretty much covers it as far as the idea of trading Will Borgen. I'm open to it, but it's not my favorite option that the Rangers have on the table. Neither is this one either that I'm about to talk about, option B here, but I figured we can at least, lay all the cards on the table and just see what it would entail. And option B is to very simply keep Will Borgen through the trade deadline this season, and you do that without extending him. And to be honest, this would probably be my least favorite of the three options. It wouldn't be a complete disaster because if you do that, you can kind of just stand pat at the deadline, keep your team intact, and not trade away Will Borgen, which would likely hurt your chances of making the playoffs or doing any sort of damage once you get there. I don't see a scenario where you trade Will Borgen and end up being a better team, at least in the short term, because of it. The other thing here, if you don't extend him before the deadline or before this season ends, and this is going to be, I think, kind of the major hangup for Ranger fans as far as this option is concerned, is you don't have any assurances that he'll be back next season, and then he also would be on his way in free agency without the Rangers getting anything for him. I think that's probably a worst-case scenario. You hang on, or the ultimate worst case is this is what happens. You hang on to Will Borgen through the trade deadline, you keep him on the team, and then the Rangers miss the playoffs anyway, and then in the offseason, he walks as a free agent, and you get absolutely nothing for hanging on to Will Borgen. You don't get to keep him. You don't get any assets for trading him at the deadline. And in this scenario, the Rangers will have missed the playoffs, so he can't help there either. That would be the worst way that this whole thing could possibly, unfold here for the Rangers. But, we'll see how it goes. I mean, they can negotiate an extension between now and the deadline. In theory, they could even do it after the trade deadline, although you got to figure the closer that Will Borgen gets to free agency, especially if he doesn't like the Ranger offers, the more he's going to want to get there, because at that point, obviously, then you can talk to multiple teams, any team that has any interest in you, and not just your current team, which in this case would, of course, be the New York Rangers. So I'm not really liking that idea of just hanging on to Borgen through the deadline. You could do it, but it's not ideal, and it certainly wouldn't be ideal if then once again he leaves in the offseason, for absolutely nothing. That would not be a good way for this to shake out for the New York Rangers. But in just a second, there is one more option where I get to that. It's the option that I prefer, and that is the possibility of extending Will Borgen and doing so before the trade deadline this upcoming season. We will talk about that, all the pros and cons of such a move, and we will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you weren't paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even know that I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It happens to all of us. Bottom line, it's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you would like to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers and conclude today's episode by my personal favorite option that the Rangers have with Will Borgen. And it's an option that I frankly expect the Rangers to pursue. You never know what could be going on behind the scenes as far as an extension is concerned. We haven't heard any such rumors, at least not yet. But part of the reason why I would like to see Will Borgen get extended, and I think there's some people that are going to agree with me on this. There might be some people that don't like this idea. He's in his late 20s. Let's just rebuild from within, et cetera, et cetera. But I think one of the reasons why most fans will at least be open to the idea of a Borgen extension is that myself, you, Ranger fans everywhere, we are all starved for a defenseman like this. Collectively this season, I'm talking, when I say like this year, I really just mean the entire season. So 2024, 2025, the season that the Rangers are currently right in the middle of, this is one of the worst seasons that we've seen from the Ranger blue line in a very, very long time. It seems like recently things have stabilized a little bit. We've seen Ryan Lindgren play better hockey. I think both Borgen and Vakanainen have mostly done good. We'll do an episode like this about Vakanainen in the future as well. Even Miller's playing a little bit better. I think that Borgen pairing has been good for him. Adam Fox looks like his dynamic self. So overall, it does look like things are moving in the right direction for that group. But man, for about 2 months or so there, you guys know, you watch this team just like I do. That group really struggled. They struggled in just about every aspect, whether it's defending the rush, whether it's just giving up too many odd man rushes in general, whether it's taking penalties, turnovers, just not being able to handle the puck, bad passing, unable to move the puck out of the zone, et cetera, et cetera. You name it. Pretty much everything, every way that a defenseman group can struggle, the Rangers did that, at least for a chunk of this season that is currently ongoing. But you look at somebody like Will Borgen, and he's come in, again, to a difficult situation. I think we need to remember that as well. When he came over, this team was basically on fire. They trade Capo Caco, and there's all this drama. He comes into a difficult situation, and I think has kind of provided some stability for the blue line. Just very steady, reliable, consistent, just somebody that goes out there and gives you an honest effort every night. And, I highlighted some of the plays that he made against Vegas earlier in this episode. Just a well-rounded defenseman. Not a whole lot of flash, but that's okay. That's not really what the Rangers need right now. They've got guys that can contribute offensively as far as their defensemen are concerned, beginning with Adam Fox. In theory, K'Andre Miller, he certainly did it in other seasons, hasn't done it as much this season. If Zach Jones ever gets back into the lineup, he can help you in that role as well. But bottom line, they need him to just basically do what he's done, just play consistent, reliable hockey. And, again, just we're still getting to know Borgen a little bit. I think that's for sure. He's only played 11 games here, but he appears to be just a very blue-collar defenseman, and I think that's why Ranger fans have taken to him, or at least the majority of Ranger fans have taken to him as quickly as they have. I know there's going to be some fans didn't like the trade when it happened, didn't want to give up Capo Caco, didn't really like the return for Capo Caco. They see what Caco's doing in Seattle, and they're probably upset about it, and I completely understand that. But like I said earlier in the episode, what's done is done. Borgen's here. Caco is not. Borgen is helping this team, at least in a different way, certainly than Capo Caco would, but helping this team nevertheless. A couple of stats to throw at you here. I had mentioned the 11 games, and you look, 1 goal, 1 assist. He's not really known for offensive fireworks, but Borgen in the 11 games, 21 block shots, 22 hits, and that's while averaging only 18:37 ice time per night. So somebody that's going out there and sacrificing the body for sure. And as far as a potential Borgen extension is concerned, I think the cap hit would be very reasonable, and I think it might be more manageable against the cap than a lot of Ranger fans might realize. We're going to go by Puckpedia here, which has basically replaced, what was it even called? Cap Friendly. Cap Friendly closed its doors a handful of months ago because, the Capitals bought them or whatever that was. But you got Puckpedia. Puckpedia projects the Rangers this upcoming offseason to have $18.86 million in salary cap space. And this does not factor in the almost guaranteed jump to that the salary cap is going to get. Right now, the NHL salary cap is $88 million. And there's also a projection out there that next season it's going to be around $92.4 million. So we'll kind of round down. We'll say $92 million is going to be the cap ceiling next season, and that will give the Rangers an extra $4 million to play with. So they'd really be looking at about close to $23 million in cap space next offseason. And that's, a pretty solid amount. You can bring a couple of guys back. You can go out into free agency and sign guys that you feel like you need to sign. And that doesn't even factor in the idea that I still think there's a pretty good chance that Chris Kreider is not going to be on this team for opening night next season. I think there's a very decent chance that he gets dealt between now and then. Could depend on his play if and when he gets back from this back injury this season, but that would save you an additional $6.5 million. Now you've got even more cap space. So I think Borgen is somebody that will end up being fairly affordable for the Rangers or several other teams that might have interest in him. But right now, again, for full context, he's in the final year, Borgen, of a 2-year, $2.7 million contract. So I think he'll get a raise from that. We'll talk financials in just a second. But another reason to consider re-signing Borgen, if maybe you're on the fence about this or even against it, and this is something we've talked about in the past, but it bears repeating. The Rangers, when it comes to their defenseman prospects, they don't really have a ton of them. And even the current Rangers on this roster, there's a lot of them that face kind of an uncertain future. We don't know what's going to happen with Miller, him being an RFA with arbitration rights. Lindgren, I mean, I think he's about as good as gone when the season ends. He's played better recently, but we've talked about how the Rangers have been hesitant to give him, a long-term deal, and certainly you can understand why. So you could be down 2 defensemen there. Borgen himself, it could go either way. We don't know whether he's going to be back or not. Vakanainen, he's an RFA with arbitration rights. He should be pretty affordable, and maybe the Rangers would look to keep him in the fold. But then you look at the prospects, and the question is, what prospects? There aren't really that many. The biggest one right now, the one that's probably closest to joining the NHL, as far as being like a true prospect, not talking about like veteran journeymen that are currently on the Wolfpack, but as far as a true prospect, Drew Fortescue, we just saw him win his 2nd straight gold with Team USA at the World Juniors. I think, he's going to be an important player for this team going forward. And obviously Emery, the Rangers drafted him in the 1st round this past year, but you got to figure, his NHL debut is not imminent. So I think it behooves the Rangers to keep a steady, reliable veteran like Will Borgen in the fold. Here's kind of a random question that I propose to all of you, though. And to be honest, none of us really know the answer to this. But Will Borgen himself, does he want to stay with the New York Rangers? Is he a New York kind of guy? Is he still kind of, finding his way? He's obviously new to the city and everything, and goes across the country from Seattle to New York. What kind of a deal does Will Borgen want? Is there going to be more emphasis on, money per season? Would he want like a higher, salary per year for a shorter contract, or would he want a longer contract to get some stability for, a little bit less money per season? He's never had a contract longer than 3 years, and that was his ELC, so it's possible that he would be looking for some length on his next contract, especially as he gets into his late 20s here. Does Borgen want at least some no-trade protection? Now, before everybody jumps on that, let me just say, the Rangers, nor any other team, I don't think at least, is going to give Will Borgen a full no-move clause. He just doesn't command that kind of a clause in his contract. But like a contract where he gets to block a trade to like 8 or 10 different teams, I think that's reasonable for both sides. Maybe there's certain cities he just doesn't want to go to, and he can add them to a no-trade list in exchange for a little bit less money per season. But, Borgen, he himself and his camp, they might want to keep the cards close to the vest right now because we don't know a ton about him. Neither do the Rangers. Again, does he like the Rangers? Does he really like his teammates? Does he feel comfortable in New York City? Those are all questions that really only he knows the answers to. And if he loves New York and he loves being a member of the Rangers, well, he's not going to let the Rangers know that, because then obviously he would lose a little bit of leverage when it comes to contract negotiations. So it's a very interesting situation. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways that this could play out, and I think you can make a case for any of them. I get the feeling, though, and I mentioned this a minute ago, going to elaborate on it now, that the Rangers would like to extend Will Borgen. You look at the trade, again, Kakko for 2 draft picks. I feel like for the Rangers, they probably did that deal and saw Will Borgen as kind of the prize get of that deal there. I don't know that they would make that deal if they didn't think there was at least a chance that they could keep Borgen in the field after this upcoming season. And as I mentioned before, I think they can do it at a reasonable length, at a reasonable amount of money. It's always difficult sizing these things up and coming up to a contract that's perfectly fair for both sides. But I'll throw a couple at you guys here real quick. How about for Will Borgen after this season, a 3-year deal worth $4 million per season? I think that sounds about right. He hasn't shown himself to be like this dynamic, otherworldly defenseman, but again, just very steady and very reliable. I think that's about the going rate for a defenseman such as that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're still getting to know Will Borgen right now, so we'll let this thing play out and assess it as all these games continue to go by here. But I think that price is about right. And if you'd rather keep the average annual value down a little bit, but maybe go a little bit longer on the contract, how about like 4 years at like $3.5 million per season, somewhere in that ballpark? I think that would be fair. I wouldn't want to go much longer than that because, as I mentioned, he's 28 years old. So if you go to 4 years, he'll be 32 around this time, 4 years from now. So he'll be getting into his early 30s there, and you don't want to take him too much farther past that, I don't think. And for a player like Borgen, I don't think it would require you to go longer than 4 years. If he hits the open market, 3 years is certainly reasonable, maybe 4 years. I don't know that anybody's going to go 5 years for Will Borgen, but we'll see. You never know for sure. As far as the 2 hypothetical contracts that I just tossed out there, though, I'm good with both of them. I think they both make sense for both sides. And I think he's a more important player to the Rangers than people might realize because, again, the lack of ready-made NHL prospects and just the fact that, again, the guys on their current roster, they're facing uncertain futures as it pertains to, their long-term future with the New York Rangers. So with all that in mind, again, combined with the fact that, Will Borgen just played very well since coming over to the Rangers mostly. Bring me Will Borgen back next season. I think it's affordable. I think it makes a lot of sense. And he's somebody that can be a very stabilizing force on the Ranger blue line. So give me Will Borgen, on the extension. Can't go nuts with it. Can't go to like 6 years at $6 million per season or anything like that. We don't want to repeat some of the mistakes that have been made in the past by this team. But I think as long as the contract is reasonable, I'm all for bringing Will Borgen back. I really like what he's done for this Ranger team, and I like what he's been bringing to the table pretty much on a night in and night out basis. So you guys let me know how you feel about it. Because, again, I think you can make a case for a lot of different approaches for the Rangers. Sooner or later, a decision is going to have to be made by the team. But curious to see what you guys come up with as well. Let me know in the comment section. Email me. Do whatever you got to do. But, we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter @jchick17, @jchik17, and definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.